In this lesson, I'll show you how to use Sketchbook Pro's Ellipse tool. This tool allows us to create accurate circles, ellipses, arcs, and curved lines. To begin, let's open the phone.tiff file. So let's move our cursor to the main menu, select File, Open, and let's select the phone. Let's go ahead and go to the Interface Lagoon and go to Zoom and Move tool. Let's zoom it out so we can see the picture in its entirety. Let's go ahead and click out. And let's do a couple more things before we start. Let's go ahead and see if we have layers. Yes, we do. We have a couple of layers. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and click on the opacity control and turn those down so they don't get in the way of our sketch. And go ahead and lock that down. At the same time, I'm going to go ahead and add a new layer so that we can have a layer totally dedicated to doing ellipses. Let's go ahead and call that layer number 3, and we'll call that the ellipse layer. That looks good. Let's save that. Let's put that aside. We don't have to look at the colors. We're going to stay in black. So let's take a look at our tools. So let's make a selection and click on our toolbox. We'll keep that handy on the side. We'll probably mostly use a pencil. We'll double click on that. That looks pretty good. It's an HB size 2, so we'll keep that. So now we have our dedicated ellipse layer. Let's go ahead and talk about the tool. Let's move your cursor over to the Interface Lagoon and press down. And you're going to drag over to this tool that looks kind of like a protractor. And it's called the Ellipse tool. So go ahead and lift up after you've selected that. And what you see here is an ellipse. Now this ellipse has several controls, and you see I'm already working on one of them. That's the move control. But there's also one here that allows you to adjust the shape, allows you to scale, larger, it allows you to rotate, allows you to move, and also allows you to deselect. Now let's go back to the Lagoon to reactivate it. Go ahead and drag to Ellipse. And let's go ahead and rotate this. And before we get started, I'd like to change the shape of this phone. I'm not particularly crazy about some of these straight lines. So what we're going to do here is we're going to experiment and play around with the contours. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to move and position a series of curves. Okay. Now before we get drawing, I'd like to introduce one other tool to make our life a little easier. Let's go ahead and go to the main menu bar and select Symmetry Y. The Symmetry line allows us to create all our curved lines only on one side, and then it will be mirrored on the other to create a full, complete drawing. So what I'm going to do is I like this curve. I might flatten it just a little bit more, a little more upright. I like that line. I'm going to go ahead and strike an arc. You see how it's struck it in a symmetrical fashion? Now let's go ahead and create another one next to it. And what that's going to do, it's going to allow us to create a series of lines so that we have something to work with as we're starting to go through all the design elements that are happening on this handset. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to grab the rotate handle. I'm going to rotate that. You see the guide here? There's a little gauge at the top that gives you some idea of where you are. This is level at 0. What I want to do is go ahead and grow my curve. So it's a little more tight. It's in the middle. And I like that arc. Actually, let's make it a little taller. It's in the middle. And you see where it is here? Let's go ahead and create another line here. Let's move it down. Create another one so that it's got an even border. And we'll create another one so it matches the other thinner line. Now, while it's still set up, let's go ahead and move that same arc, and we're going to strike lines at the bottom. And that looks pretty good. So we're going to go ahead and strike a line there. Now, again, I'm only drawing on one side. We're going to move it up a bit more, strike another one, and another one in that fashion. Now, there are several more ellipses that we need to draw. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and reduce the scale. And while I'm doing that, I'm also going to use my move and zoom control from the user interface, position it right over the ellipse, so I can see my buttons a little more closely. I'm going to move my ellipse. I'm going to grow just a little bit more. And you see how it's centered around that sketched object? I'm going to go ahead and strike my arc. And because my symmetry tool is still in position, I can create a button on the other side as well. Let's go ahead and get those other buttons in. And you see how those guidelines, and thank goodness the guidelines are there because those are going to be real helpful for positioning the buttons evenly on your drawing. Now let's go ahead and use our move and zoom button. Zoom out. Are there any other lines that we need to curve? No, we don't. So let's go ahead and select the deselect button to turn that off. And while the symmetry tool is still on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw in the horizontal lines that I need to complete the screen and a separation line dividing the screen from the keypad. So I'm going to hold down my Shift key on my keyboard. And you see how even with the symmetry tool, I can create all of these lines. And now I'm going to go ahead and move my cursor up to the top while my Shift key is still held down on my keyboard, create the vertical line. Let's go to our toolbox. I can still use the symmetry tool to clean up all of my details. Let's go ahead and turn on our resize brush tool. So I can now create some curved lines to really soften the design. I'll go down below, use my eraser. Let's go ahead and get rid of some of these lines. Select my pencil tool, again using the symmetry tool. I can clean that up a bit more. Let's go ahead and zoom out. And I'm also going to do a couple things. I'm going to go back to my layer editor. I'm going to go to hide layer to hide the original line drawings. And there you have it. You now have a new telephone created using the Ellipse tool. In closing, freehand drawing circles and ellipses can often be a challenge, let alone being able to draw them accurately. Sketchbook Pro's Ellipse tool makes it easy to draw both ellipses and curved lines.